Hello, this is Community Unity Now, the D Tycoon Show. My co-host is Bill Morton, president of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce, and I am Trudy Leong, administrator of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. Our very, very special guest is Joy Cunningham. She is the Illinois Supreme Court Justice, and she is running for election to keep her seat, for retention of her seat.
That's correct.
Welcome, Justice Cunningham.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, first of all, tell us a little bit about the election. Is the primary, how is the primary different from the general election in November? How does it affect you?
Okay. The primary election, which is on March 19th, is the election in which I'm running. And for most judicial candidates in Cook County, the primary election is the really important or relevant election because you're essentially running against someone from your own party to determine who will represent the party in the general election. However, in Cook County, the general election usually only contains a Democratic candidate for the judicial seats. So if you win the primary election, it's a pretty good bet that you will be elected to that seat in the November election.
And for other parts of the state, there are also candidates up for retention, and those might be Republicans, and they do not have an opposing party running against them, as you do not have an opposing party running against you?
Well, the state is divided into 5 judicial districts for purposes of the court. And Cook County is District 1. And in District 1, I am the person that's running for the seat that's open. District 4 also has a candidate who, like myself, was appointed to the court, and now she has to run to keep her seat. And that is Justice Lisa Holder White. And she is a Republican candidate, and she is fortunate not to have an opponent.
And if Judge Holder White does not, Justice Holder White does not have an opponent, and she does not spend a lot of money campaigning, how many votes does she need to win her seat?
Well, just the majority. She just needs whoever votes. There won't be another candidate. So it's the plurality of votes. That means that however many people vote, since she has no opponent, that will be sufficient. It's not a specific number because it's a plurality election, not a majority election. So whoever gets the most votes, and if you're running unopposed, you will get the most votes, even if it's 5 or 10.
Even if it's her voting for herself.
That's correct, and I would expect that she would. She's an excellent justice, and I am sure that she would vote for herself. But yes, that's how it works.
Do you know that in the past, were there any justices that had very few votes, but of course in such similar situations they retained their seat?
Yes, 2 years ago in the 2020 election, I think it was 2020, or may have been the 2022 election, there were many candidates running. If my memory serves me correctly, I think there may have been 5 or 6. And in that election, the winning justice, I think, had 26% of the vote because there were so many people running that it was all divided. And many of them were excellent, so they had a following, and so they got a significant amount of the votes, and the winner was able to win with less than 30% of the votes.
So in order for them to want to run, do they have to have the court's blessing in order to run? How do they just register at the Board of Election, their D2 and all that? Or how does one start running as a judicial candidate?
That's a very good question. No, the court does not have to ratify whoever seeks to run. The Constitution spells out who shall be a judge and what the qualifications are to be a judge in the state of Illinois. So essentially, if you are a lawyer and you're properly licensed and you have no disciplinary actions and you haven't been convicted of a crime, those kinds of qualifications, you can put your name on the ballot and run for judicial office. Usually that doesn't happen that way, but theoretically it could.
Like the Chicago municipal elections, we have petition signatures to gain. Do you have to do something like that?
Yes, judicial candidates have to collect petition signatures, and it's a specific number based on the number of voters that voted for that position in the prior election. So it changes from time to time, and most judicial candidates hire an election lawyer because it's complicated. Knowing exactly how many signatures you need, as well as the other requirements, the papers that you have to file and all of that. So most candidates hire an election lawyer to make sure that they've met all of the qualifications, because it's a very strictly construed statutory requirement, and if you get one part of it wrong, you could find yourself off the ballot.
Are there a lot of competitive challenges like in the Chicago municipal election?
Absolutely. Often you will review your opponent's petitions to see that they are proper. Make sure people who sign petitions for candidates must be registered voters, and they must live at the address that their voter registration cards say they live at. When they sign the petition, they have to be they have to sign for themselves. Somebody can't sign for them, and their registration has to be current. All of those things, and if you find and you have to have the right amount, the correct number of signatures. So if you review your opponent's signatures and you find something wrong, such as an inadequate number of signatures, or voters who don't live at the address that they say they live at, or signature collectors who aren't themselves registered voters, any of those things can end up disqualifying a candidate.
And I'm certain you've heard stories of judges being kicked off the ballot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you haven't met the requirements, the law is pretty clear, and it's what's called a strictly construed statute. So there's very little leeway for discretion. Either you're in compliance or you're not.
And how many signatures did you require this time around, and how many did you get?
I think I required 4,270, and I filed approximately 29,000.
Yeah. So even if, since you have that many if some of them were not compliant, you will still have enough compliant ones to help you maintain that spot on the ballot.
That's correct, and that's the exact reason that most candidates file sometimes five times as many, which is what I did, 5 times as many signatures as you need, because even if half of them end up being not appropriate, you still have enough to stay on the ballot.
Whenever I speak with my election attorney, he always advises me to get over 3 times the amount of the minimum.
That's very true, and this time I think I got more than that, maybe almost 5 times the amount of the minimum. So he gave you good advice.
So what was your first election like versus this one? And what were you running for in the first election?
I ran for the appellate court. I was on the appellate court for 16 years before the Supreme Court tapped me to serve on the Supreme Court when Justice Ann Burke retired. And that campaign was in a different era. It was 16, 17 years ago. And we are now completely in the digital era. So just the logistics of that campaign was very different from what we're doing now. We didn't have the same level of social media involvement. Now every campaign is pretty much completely engaged with the social media platforms of the day, whatever those may be. And that was not the case then. So it was a lot more of organic contact, going door to door and talking with people and going to organizations, which I am still doing today. But in addition, I'm also doing a lot of social media activities and other things that were not and like television appearances and so on, things that did not happen 16 or 17 years ago.
Well, this is a television appearance right
Yes,
here.
this is what I'm talking about.
And this will go on YouTube as well.
Yes, that's wonderful. And 16 or 17 years ago, nothing like this was on. Well, I think YouTube existed, but it was in a very nascent period, and nobody used YouTube for campaigning. But now it's almost a necessity.
So in your first election, were you an attorney running for a public judge, or were you appointed and were also trying to retain your seat?
No, I was not appointed. I was actually running for the seat. I was an attorney running for the seat.
And what was your intention? Why did you want to run for a judge at that time?
Well, I felt that that was the highest and best use of my experience and my talents. I've had what I call a very non-linear judicial career, legal career rather. So I had done so many different things, and I felt that it was it was time for me to do something different, something where I could really use my legal talents but still feel like I was making a difference. And I had already been a trial court judge and left the bench, so I did not want to go back to the trial court. I wanted to go to another level of the court, and the appellate court seemed like the logical place, and I was encouraged to run for the appellate court by a dear friend who was herself at that time an appellate court justice. And so that's how it came about.
Were you appointed to your trial court seat?
No, I wasn't appointed. I was an associate judge. An associate judge is selected by the circuit court judges. Oh. That means it's like the judges vote for you to become a judge. And that's one of the ways to become a trial court judge in Illinois. You can be chosen by all of the circuit court judges.
Yeah, but you had to apply to be on the ballot for them to vote on you.
Yes, you're on the associate judge ballot, and all of the circuit court judges in Cook County will select who gets to be an associate judge. And the Constitution says that there must be 2 candidates for each seat. So if there are 6 seats, then there are 12 candidates, and those 12 candidates go around to every single circuit court judge that they are able to fit into their schedule and present their credentials, ask for their support. But before they do that, they have to go before the Bar Association, so they're all found qualified. And then the chief judge has a committee of presiding judges, and they vet the candidates as well. So you get the entire herd is culled down to the final 2 candidates for each seat, and then those are the ones that the circuit court judges are then asked to pick for the vacancies.
So I guess if there were multiple candidates for their seat, then the 2 with the highest number of votes, they would be the final 2 candidates.
That's correct.
Okay, so like for now, for your seat, when Amber selected you to fill her seat.
Well, Ann Burke didn't. She may have recommended me, but the Supreme Court is the body that selected me.
Got it. Yeah. And did you have to apply for them to consider you?
I didn't apply in the sense of filling out an application, but they got my resume, and the way it works, the court certainly engages with you. They talk with you a little bit, but by the time you're going, a justice is going to be appointed to the Supreme Court, you've been in the judiciary for a period of time, so everybody either knows your qualifications, they know you, and it's more of a formality, so to speak, because you're a known quantity. I can't think of anybody that's ever been appointed to the Supreme Court that came from outside the system. They're all from the appellate court because you've already had the experience of being on a court of review. So the transition for you to the Supreme Court is not as difficult as if you came from outside the system or from the trial court.
And so did you have to make it known to them that you were interested in the seat, or it was just on your experience that they inquired whether you would want to be considered?
No, you have to make it known that you're interested, or that this is something that you would consider if it were offered to you. But there is no formal process for applying for a seat on the Illinois Supreme Court. When the court determines that there's going to be a vacancy, I gather, and I don't know this for sure, but my understanding is they then get together and discuss who are the potential candidates, and then they make a determination.
Okay. Do you know if there were other candidates that also made it known that they wanted to be considered?
I don't know.
So you're in an election now. The election is coming up. How's your campaign doing?
My campaign is actually doing well. I'm a very high energy person, so I am doing all the things that you would expect, getting out into the community and meeting people and talking with the committeemen and leaders in various communities to get their support, and just being out in the public eye as much as possible. And it's very stressful, but it's also very invigorating in many ways, because it gives me an opportunity to speak to people in a way that I wouldn't have the opportunity to do if I wasn't campaigning.
And you're going through the endorsement sessions?
I was endorsed by the Democratic Party, and I have a tremendous amount of support from labor unions and other public officials and prominent community leaders. I have about 30 labor union endorsements, many professional organizations, and many of our elected officials, including some of our constitutional officers like the Attorney General and the Secretary of State.
Do you know why the labor unions endorsed you? Did you preside over a lot of labor cases? What do you know the rationale?
It's a process with all of these organizations. You go and present your credentials to them. You tell them who you are. They look at your background. They look at your resume, your CV, and they interview you. And they make a determination based on the information that they get from the interview, from looking at your background, and from the questionnaires, if they offer a questionnaire, and some of them do. So they look at all of those things, and then you have to appear before them, and it's an interview and question and answer process, and it's competitive because every union that I appeared before, my opponent also appeared.
And when you appeared before the union, I know that there was one session in which a lot of the unions were together. Did you appear before that group? Or individually?
No, I appeared individually before many different unions. I know that the Chicago Federation of Labor, which ultimately endorsed me, is made up of many smaller unions. And the Illinois Federation of Teachers, which ultimately endorsed me, also encompasses the Chicago Teachers Union, which also ultimately endorsed me. But I didn't appear before them jointly. I appeared before the individual unions.
What kind of questions do they ask? Do they ask you just about your record, or do they give you situations and just probe to see what you would think in such a situation?
They ask, and it depends on the union, they ask a variety of questions. And I think generally they want to know who you are as a person. When I appeared before the healthcare unions, for example, they were interested to know about my healthcare background, which, most people find unusual. So they were interested in that because that told them something about me and who I was. Some of the other unions were interested to hear about my family background because that told them something about who I was in terms of how I saw labor unions as fitting into my world. So the questions were really varied. They were all over the board, but there was no questions based on cases or what I would do in a particular case, nothing like that.
What have you learned in your campaign? That you went out into the community, and of course you're always learning. What have you learned in this campaign?
I've learned a lot of things in this campaign, but just picking one in no particular order of importance, I've learned that people are generally good, and that they will help you if they can, and that I think the campaign has somewhat renewed my faith in human nature. People are generally good. That's one thing I've learned. I've also learned that people want to know, they want to have more knowledge. I find that the lack of teaching civics in school these days it's a real disservice to our community, because most people have no idea how the government functions. They don't know how the judiciary functions. Many of our young people don't really even realize that there are three branches of government, that the judiciary is one of those three, and what each branch does. So I have found that giving this knowledge is important and people welcome it. I was surprised to find that, but that's true. I do a lot of speaking at schools. As a matter of fact, on Thursday, day after tomorrow, I'm going to a school on the west side with it's a high school, but these are our future leaders, and they don't understand how our democracy works. So that was one thing that really was very starkly obvious to me, that I need to do as much as I can to educate the next generation, because they really don't understand what I consider to be the basic tenets of democracy.
The current generation needs your advice as well, because Bill and I are both election judges, and we run into a lot of voters who tell us, I'm not going to vote for judicial candidates because I don't know who these people are. So what would you say to those voters?
Well, this cycle, the Democratic Party has done a really excellent job of vetting the candidates. And I cannot tell you, there isn't a single candidate that is on the Democratic Party slate who isn't highly qualified. They are all highly qualified. So I do know that most ward organizations have what they call sample ballots, and you can take that into the voting booth and the polling place with you. They have the list of all of the people who are running for judge who have been vetted by the bar associations, the Democratic Party's judicial evaluation process, and their peers. And we have, for the first time in a long time, a really stellar slate of candidates. So in my view, if you don't know who to vote for, you can go to the Bar Association's website and they will tell you something about all of these candidates, or you can simply take the mailer that you get from the Democratic Party and take it into the polling place with you, and you can be confident in knowing that those people were really vetted heavily.
And for the Chicago Bar Association, before I would receive that blue sheet telling us
guide.
The green guide, yes.
And I don't know if they're not sending it out, but they usually send it closer to the election. Mm-hmm. And I do know that their website has a posting that tells you the evaluation of all of the judicial candidates. And I am pleased to say that the Chicago Bar Association found me highly qualified, and they are pretty much the gold standard for judicial evaluations.
When you're running, and then did you still have to appear before the Chicago Bar Association and speak with them?
I did indeed, and they found me highly qualified.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much.
And this is Bill Morton, President of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. I am Trudy Leong, Administrator of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce, and we have been talking with Joy Cunningham, Illinois Supreme Court Judge running for retention of her seat. Thank you so much for joining us on Community Unity Now. See you again next week.